Hi, I'm Matt and welcome to my shop. Today we're going to be cutting the half mitred lapped dovetail, which is this joint here. You can see the pins and then there's nothing on top, and then there is a mitred shoulder. This is a great joint for cabinet making when you want to see the grain flow all the way around the piece uninterrupted, but you also don't want to use hidden dovetails because who wants to hide the dovetails? That's pointless. You want to see the dovetails, but you don't want them to be big and ugly. So nice skinny pins, a clean top, which is excellent if you're not using a crown moulding, and continuous grain flow around your cabinet. So if you want to learn how to cut this joint, or if you just want to watch me struggle cutting it because it's a struggle to cut it, keep watching and enjoy the video. I start off by marking a shoulder line with a marking gauge just on the inside of the tails board and also just on the inside of the pins board. Here I'm just using a 1 in 8 dovetail marker to mark out the pins. This joint has to be cut pins first, otherwise you won't be able to get a saw or a marking knife or pencil in between the tails to mark out your pins. And then just simply square down on the inside face. A lot of this footage is going to be sped up, but there's a few bits like this that are going to be played at normal speed just so you can see how slow I'm actually going when I'm making these cuts. It's really important with this joint to be as precise as possible. And now I simply cut all of the pins, cutting one side of the pins first and then the second side after that. Right, so what we're going to do now is take our coping saw and cope out the waste at about a 45-degree angle-ish. So when using a coping saw, the best way to do it is to slide the blade down your existing saw curve and then saw back and forwards but without any lateral movement, and this allows you to twist the blade in the saw curve. Once it's twisted around, you can then cut along where you want to cut. And this makes removing the waste much quicker. Next I cut the miters for the external shoulders. Again, going very slow and taking my time with it. Right, so this is what the joint should look like at the minute. Can you see that? And what we're going to do now is we're going to start paring with a chisel. Now, if you've not seen one of these before, this is a paring block. It's basically been cut at 45 degrees, but square along here, and then plane so it's nice and smooth, checking the angles. And then these sides are also 90 degrees to the faces. So you can use it to pare at 45 and you can also use it to pare vertically down. So this edge here is lined up with a marking knife, and I'm going to start using the mallet and cutting away from all my lines. So when you're making these cuts, you want to remove all of the waste before you actually get to your marking knife line. And one of the issues with doing that whilst using a paring block is that if you're taking big cuts, it tends to knock your paring block backwards, even if it's held down with holdfasts. So you've got to keep a close eye on it and keep checking that it's still lined up, and if it needs any corrections made, just simply make them with a few taps of a mallet. Once you get down near your marking line, it's best to put the mallet away and just pare by hand. So when I'm doing this, I'm pushing the chisel into the face of the paring block, and I'm pushing down as well to get a nice smooth cut and taking very, very thin shavings. I then pare between all the pins and do the final shoulder, and then get rid of all the fuzz with a chisel. And what you should be left with is a joint that looks something like this. So all this jig is 2 bits of ply at 90 degrees and 2 lips here that I can register these against. That means I can push this right up into the corner and pull it tight against there. And then I can rest that on top. With your pencils, you want to be using something like a 2H. You don't want to be going for a HB, it's too soft and it'll keep snapping on you. So this marking board is designed specifically for cutting pins first. There are others for cutting tails first that work in basically the same way. And now I'm squaring all those across the top and starting to make the cuts. So I'm wanting to stay on the inside of these lines here. With these cuts, it's really important that you keep the line. Cut on your waist side, but keep the full line, and this will give you a nice tight fitting dovetail. And these lines have just been penciled on. I prefer to use a pencil because I can cut to a side of the line rather than with a marking knife where the saw tends to end up in the kerf, and that kerf is always on the outside of the joint, which always leaves a gap. So I much prefer to use a pencil to do my marking because I find it more accurate. And now that I've made the initial cut, I'm making the second cut on the opposite wall of the tails using a normal carcass saw. This is because the curve of the saw is much fatter, so it doesn't slip out of the original curve quite as much, and it allows you to effectively cut a single curved dovetail. So this part of it is just exactly like normal dovetailing. I really need to fit a new coping saw blade because this one is starting to twist out of shape and it's hard to control. And following that, I just chisel out the waste, chiseling from both sides to meet in the middle so I don't have any blowouts. And then after that, I then need to pare all of these tails down to 45 degrees. And in order to get rid of most of the waste, I'm just going to cut it off with a carcass saw. However, my carcass saws aren't deep enough to cut all the way through, so I've got to do it in a couple of passes. And even doing it in 2 passes, my saw isn't quite deep enough, so I've got to do a little bit on the edge, as you see here. And then it's simply back to paring exactly the same as we did before. Starting off removing most of the waste by using the mallet and then going to hand paring afterwards. So when it comes to paring by hand, what you'll find easiest most of the time is to remove 1 chisel width of shaving, and then after that you can just go across and remove 1 or 2 millimeters at a time, sliding across after each cut, and it makes it really easy to pare down. after that it's just a case of fitting the joint. Now, as with most dovetails, when these first come together, they won't look quite as neat as you were hoping. I mean, they should fit tight, but there'll be bits sticking out further than they should and stuff like that. So after fitting, you need to plane down the outside face of both boards to see what it actually looks like. And once it's planed flush, you should have a nice tight fitting dovetail, and the mitred line running down the corner should be straight. What you'll find though is that unless you're exceptionally good at this, it isn't always perfectly straight, but it's close enough. So that's it for the half mitred lapped dovetail joint. It's a great joint, like I said, if you want to have cabinets where the grain flows around the corners but you still want to see the joinery that's involved in it. It's a very elegant joint if done well. My example here is not the best, but it's getting there. I've only cut this joint once before, so it's all practice, you know. Anyway, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down. Leave a comment below and tell me what you thought and what you would like to see in the future and whether or not you like this style of video. And don't forget to subscribe. Right, other than that, that's it. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Cock. Well, that's that buggered. Just goes to show you that we all make mistakes. I've been cutting these through like proper dovetails, and they're not supposed to be. I'm supposed to be cutting them on a mitre. Oh well.